Happiness is beautiful, it's a kind reality. Happiness is the highest good, happiness is free. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.
Hi, welcome to the Happiness Show. This is Lionel Ketchian. I'm here with George Ortega, and we're here to talk about happiness, because happiness is, always has been, and always will be the point of it all. Today we're going to be talking about happiness and power. I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion, because if happiness is anything, it is power. Although we may not look at it that way, because we think of happiness as being so many different things, and it may bring up different meanings for each of us as we think about it. But in its essence, I think we're going to finally come out with the idea that happiness certainly is power in every way, and yet the world probably doesn't look at it that way. So George, this is an interesting topic that we've selected for today, and I want to thank you for having the foresight to introduce happiness and power, because it needs to be introduced and to be understood better.
Yeah, well, actually, Lionel, you know, like this, I hadn't thought of happiness as power per se until we began to talk about it. I think you actually mentioned this to me, and it made, you know, the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. The first way I think that happiness is power is that the idea that it's power over our negative emotions. You know, as we become happier, and like, yeah, that. In terms of our experience on the planet, our day-to-day existence, what we're living for, that really is the ultimate power, because that's what we're always struggling against, our negative emotions, regardless of whether they come from circumstances, other people and all. So happiness is, as you say, the ultimate power, because it is the ultimate power over these negative emotions.
Yes, and ultimately it's the ultimate power over ourselves. And you know, when we say over our negative emotions, it's really learning to, power is control. And when we learn to control ourselves, that's why we have power. And you know, the old story that you know, a power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, is true from the standpoint that it's really saying that power without control corrupts. And when we have no control of our power, that's the problem, and that's one of the things that creates unhappiness. And when we learn to control our happiness, we end up having the power that comes from being happy. And I like to say that when it comes to happiness, don't give your power away, because when you give your power away and you become unhappy, other people tap into that and can only affect you when you're unhappy. So another good reason to feel happy is that you don't give your power away when you're happy to others. You give your power away when you're unhappy, and you think they have power over you, and actually the exchange was that you've handed them the power that you could have maintained for yourself.
Yeah, and we're going to actually explore more the connection between the power of happiness and other people. I just want to like get a bit more into the idea of how happiness is power over negative emotions. Because one way is that our minds can only generally focus on one emotion or mood at a time. A lot of times our emotions and moods are mixed, but there tends to be a predominant emotion or a predominant mood. And what happens is, as we focus on happiness, as we become happier, as we make that our central purpose, the negative emotions don't have room in our consciousness to plant themselves and make themselves felt. And so that's the power, and it's a very simple power. It's not a matter of like overcoming all our negative emotions. It's not a matter of understanding them, understanding their root and all. All we really have to do is focus on our happiness and use that power of happiness, and those negative emotions just automatically diminish.
That's a great point. You know, as you're talking, George, I get this visualization of like, you know, here I am with all these emotions inside. You know, there's a whole bunch of little characters, and they're all screaming, pick me, I'm mad, pick me, I'm unhappy, pick me. And there's happiness saying, well, you could choose me, you could select me. And when you select that, like you say, as soon as the selection process as soon as you focus on one thing, everything else has to line up underneath it. And so it's not a matter of dissipating all that negative energy, it's a matter of selecting happiness so you don't have to deal with all that negative energy. And then the other stuff just either goes away or finds its rightful place or stands in line and waits. So that's interesting. It really is. It's a good way to look at it. You can select happiness because in selecting happiness, you're not selecting a lot of other negative emotions that could be, ready to spring up and act as if you have to give them time and space.
Right, and the part of the beauty of this is that it simplifies everything. I mean, we could devote our power, trying to access power and create power and express power, toward addressing and solving all of these different kinds of negative emotions, because, I mean, they're different. They come to us from many different sources.
Sure, and that'll take forever.
Exactly, whereas this is so simple because all we have to do is exercise our power to become happier, and that just eliminates or minimizes all the negative emotions at once.
Oh, that's great. When we're talking about power, I want to make a point that there is some power, or at least perceived power, in unhappiness. And I want to, because after all, why does unhappiness exist if it doesn't provide some function or some sort of answer to our daily lives? And I've come to feel that what unhappiness does in its way is it is a sort of a screaming out and saying it needs to make something wrong, so that it screams out that this is wrong, this is unfair, I've been treated badly, you're stepping on me, and I won't stand for it anymore. And so what this unhappiness does for a person is it seems to generate power under the disguise of creating your egotistical self and feeling as if you really are in power because you're mad. When you feel you're mad at someone, you feel your power. But actually, you also sense a loss of power. It's almost like alcohol. You feel powerful when you drink, but then you lose consciousness, so you had no power at all. And if you could remain unhappy, and this is what many people do, they make their cause unhappiness, and they maintain their power through unhappiness, but through no benefit. They get no benefit out of it, because even if they win the argument or win this court case or whatever it might be, they're still left with no power. Their only power is to create another problem so they can go to battle over the next problem, so they could feel their sense of self in the next argument and in the next unhappiness exchange. So rather than live that way, we can stop trying to maintain our power from unhappiness, and we could begin to get this feeling that happiness is power. And I think other people see it, and they mess around with you a lot less when you're powerful from that standpoint. And when you're unhappy, it's written all over you. And people, in fact, I would say that only when you're unhappy can you be taken advantage of. And people think it's the other way around. I state that it's the unhappy people that get taken advantage of, because people are always, ready to take over your power in that position.
Okay, and that's a perfect segue into exploring, how power and happiness and people connect, because it's not just what happens is the ultimate battle is between us and our negative emotions, and happiness is our ultimate weapon. But what happens is these negative emotions come from other sources, and yes, we can use happiness as our main means, but it also helps to have other strategies that work along with that. And so we find that a lot of times our unhappiness our happiness is threatened by other people. And this is where the happiness comes in. A lot of times, for example, we tend to be competitive a lot of times. We compete for money, for power, for prestige, for a lot of things in life, and even for emotions. Like, we might be with a person, let's say, who's not feeling very good, and that threatens our happiness. Or we may be with a person who gains their happiness in a sense by assuming or expressing some manner of superiority toward another person, toward people in general. So in other words, some people will tend to feel happy when they are kind of like diminishing the happiness or the power of others. Now, where happiness comes in is that regardless of what kind of situation one finds oneself in, is if one is with people and people are behaving in some way that is just not, that we feel is like not right, not appropriate, not conducive to our own well-being, you know, that the person is fulfilling their own needs or wants rather than just behaving in a good way. Happiness it's a perfect tool for that, because what happens is, like, in those situations, those people, the power that they have is, and it's really the only power they have, is in limiting or minimizing the power of the other person. Because what else could they do? So, the obvious answer is by focusing and maintaining one's happiness in the midst of situations where we're with people like that, then we gain control over what's necessary, and we diminish the power of the other person, and we maintain our happiness. So in a sense, we can be with another person and express the power that we feel we need by expressing a great happiness regardless of what the other person is doing.
Absolutely. You know, there's a lot of discussion back and forth, and this has come up for me a lot of times. People say to me, well, I really don't like being around negative people or unhappy people. And I say, well, I don't mind. I mean, you're a positive person, a happy person. I like being around you, George. And the fact is, I like being around everyone. It doesn't matter whether they're positive or negative, happy or unhappy. And what I find is that when I cut through the resistance to them, I'm not there to be right. I'm just there to be happy. And so I could care less what they do. That's their problem. And what I find is that they're more reluctant to act unhappy around me because they sense that it's not going to make any difference to me, so they can't affect me. And that's where we're talking about power. When we're happy and we express our power through happiness, it actually manifests in the room. It actually, I think people understand it. They, you know, even if it's an other than conscious level, they appreciate it and they say, well, look, I'm going to express my viewpoint, but I'm not going to try to play the argument game and right-wrong game, because, you know, I've had people say that they think they're right, and I say, well, everyone's right. I mean, if you have an opinion, you're right with that opinion. But the question is, are you happy? That's the real question. Because once you're happy, then you're right, you know, because your feelings will carry you along. So I think from the standpoint of happiness as power, it's that being happy has that power, and it's not about right and wrong. You let go of that, and you let people be whatever they want to be. That's up to them. And I think we could teach people more about happiness by being ourselves than telling them anything. They can learn more from who we really are than any words we have to tell them, I think.
Sure. And it's not, again, it's not just about people, because you know, people are one source of either our happiness and our unhappiness, and of course we want to use the power of happiness to limit people's power over us in creating our unhappiness. Mm-hmm. But then there our happiness is threatened by circumstances a lot, by problems, like we're trying to work on something, it's not working, our finances aren't the way they might be, just circumstances in life, not having what we want, not having what we think we need. These kinds of circumstances, if we allow them to, will diminish our happiness and sometimes eliminate it completely. So that's where the happiness comes in. Now, we have to just constantly remind ourselves that the reason these circumstances are important to us in the first place is because we consider that they have power over our happiness. Because if they were just like circumstances that didn't relate to our happiness, they wouldn't matter to us, you know, whether they worked out or not. So once we understand that, it's just wisest to say to ourselves, wait a minute, you know, this circumstance is just not necessary to my happiness level, to my feeling of happiness, and we can basically guide ourselves to our happiness regardless of the circumstances. We could take that power away from the circumstances to control and determine our happiness, and simply just, instead of going from a two-step process from circumstances being the way we want, we feel as happy as we want, we could go right to the happiness and say, we're going to feel happy regardless of circumstances. And that's the power of happiness over basically most, I'm not sure I can say all circumstances, but virtually every kind of circumstance we find ourselves in.
Excellent, George, excellent. Basically, we come along to a situation happens, and it's our resistance to the situation. In other words, we don't want it to happen, and that's why we start becoming unhappy, and we give our power away to the situation. And here's a fact. The fact is that the situation already happened. So it's as if our unhappiness was going to change what already happened. It can't change it. It can't change it. It could only make now even worse than it was before. So the situation that's already occurred, your resistance to that, your unhappiness to that, you're giving your power away to that, only makes it worse. And you were right when you said that if it was a circumstance that you had some investment in, then what you're really saying to that circumstance is that you don't want it to take your happiness away. Here you were happy, and then this had to happen, and now it's threatening your unhappiness, or it's threatening your happiness. But the fact is, you don't have to give your power away to that situation. You can hold on to your happiness, because that's what you want in the exchange anyway, and deal with the situation if it needs to be dealt with, or let go of it if it needs to be, if that's the way to deal with it. And by being happy, you maintain the best choice of avenues to deal with the situation. You don't let the situation deal with you. And you're what we're really talking about here when we talk about the power of happiness, and it is a power, is freedom. Is finding our freedom from people, from circumstances, from the things that we've normally invested our power in. We've given our power away, and then we say, hey, this made me unhappy, when in fact, we just gave our power away.
It's so true. That's so true. And again, happiness is that power. And the more we use it, the less power everything else in our life has. And part of it is that we can be happy regardless of how happy or not other people, but generally, when the people around us, when our world is happier, we're going to be happier. It's going to be easier to be happier. And so that's a lot of our lives then is devoted to helping not just ourselves, but helping those around us, helping our family, our community, our world. And happiness is a wonderful power for this, because what happens is, like, as we become happier, our needs, our personal needs diminish. We have what we want. Happiness is what we want. And so when we feel fulfilled, when we feel that our basic need is totally fulfilled by our great happiness, we have something to give the world, whether it's like sacrificing our time, reaching out to others. Basically, our happiness allows us the freedom of mind, the freedom of circumstance to go out and help other people to become as happy as they can. And of course that rewards us, because the happier of the people around us become, the easier it becomes for us to feel happier in the future. So again, happiness is this great power, not just for our own benefit, but for the benefit of those around us.
Yeah, you raise an interesting point, Georgia, and as you're talking, I'm thinking about the need for money and the need to work so you could support yourself. And people go out and they try to fulfill that need. But in truth, it's probably an overwhelming need that can never totally, who amongst us can say, oh, I have too much money. Would you please take some of my money? It's overwhelming me. Nobody's got that problem. There's never enough. There's always room for more. But with happiness, it's the same type of thing, except that when you begin to have happiness, you could share it with others. You're ready to give it away to others. And that's an interesting need, because it fulfills a need not only within yourself, but it becomes a power, because then you can give it away. And if you haven't got it, you haven't got it to give. Like money, the truth is that if you haven't got money, you haven't got it to give. But most people who have money aren't really necessarily giving it away. Not usually. Maybe the very rich, or a little bit at a time. But with happiness, You can make it your business to spread it out every chance you get, only because you've got it. And that's another reason happiness is a power, because it's something you're giving away.
Oh yeah, and if we want to extend this idea of our happiness being power to help others, we've got elections coming up in November, and happiness is a great political power, because what happens is that, I mean, research studies have demonstrated as people become happier, they become more compassionate. They become more concerned, not just with their welfare, but with the welfare of everyone. And our government, politics in general, ideally functions under what's known as the utilitarian philosophy of the greatest good being what creates the greatest happiness for the greatest number. So, you know, as we become happier, not just as individuals, as a group, we can focus our efforts politically, you know, instituting programs, instituting policies to help those around us become happier, and that's, you know, that makes our happiness as a power much more magnified, because it becomes institutionalized. It has different structures within to function. I mean, you know, just creating the policy. For example, we advocate teaching happiness in schools. Politically, we can get that done, you know, by having our happiness be a power, and then using politics, using voting in the elections to just bring the right people in who are going to implement that. It becomes a very, very effective means of just extending that happiness of power much more so than simply just having it in an individual manner.
Well, it's great. So then what we're saying here is that happiness is a power, because once you have happiness, you need less things. You don't come out of need as much. You're able to spread happiness more. You're able to share it with others. And wow, so we can actually help other people more when we're happy than when we're unhappy.
And also with politics, I mean, we're accustomed to sometimes a politics that tends to go negative a lot. You know, people become angry and like, but, you know, I mean, in our country, 1/4 of the eligible voters end up voting. I mean, this is like in Europe, it's far higher. I think half of registered voters vote in these national elections, presidential elections. With happiness, you know, what happens is, like, if you're going for a cause, if you're trying to have people work on a cause, it's extremely difficult to have masses of people maintain anger at an issue for months and months, and sometimes these political campaigns take that. Whereas if, as a political strategy, you focus your campaign and your politics and your basic direction with happiness in mind, with happiness guiding it, then the constituencies, the masses of people you try to rally to these causes, are energized. I mean, the anger, again, is difficult to sustain over months, but the happiness energizes and really allows a kind of a mass of people working on a certain cause to really sustain those efforts, to really enjoy the process rather than suffering the anger throughout the campaign.
Well, that's excellent. So talk about a positive campaign, that would be it. And my feeling is one of the points that you've actually made in putting this particular program together, George, is that happiness is a very good form of power, is one of the things that you had brought up in our initial conversation with happiness as power. And it's also, I think, not only a very good form, but a very high form of power. And, you know, when we use the word power, like happiness or other words, it's completely misunderstood. What we're really talking about with happiness as a power, and a real power, is not power over, but power within. And I consider that real power. I mean, the power that we've been dealing with in politics and countries and leaders and so forth was always power over others. But this is a different kind of power. This is true power within oneself, to manage oneself, to control oneself. And isn't this what religion was always hoping for? And so part of this power is virtuousness, is goodness, because when one does the right thing for oneself and others, wow, there's heaven on earth. I mean, there's the beginning. And happiness is actually the power that could begin that transformation for people, for them to feel good about themselves, eliminate some of the needs, not feel afraid, feel like sharing, feel like they're part of the human race and embrace others, but it starts with embracing themselves.
Yeah, that's so true, because whether we're dealing with ourselves or with the world around us, there are basically two strategies, two kinds of power. And we often hear this as either the carrot or the stick, you know. What, the honey or what's the other one?
Well, I think of stick, you know, the honey.
Anyway, so the idea is like power comes in the sense of punishment or reward. And studies understand this. I mean, they've been researching this for decades. Basically, whether we're dealing with ourselves, you know, in trying to get ourselves to be the person we want to be and to feel how we want to feel, or we're dealing with other people individually or in groups, it's so much more pleasant and so much more effective to stay positive and use happiness as the source of power. That's why, yeah, I fully, you know, believe and consider that happiness is, as Aristotle said, the highest good, the greatest good, because it's the most pleasant good. I mean, sure, the stick works sometimes. I mean, sometimes perhaps it's necessary, but there's no comparison using the stick with using what's the stick?
Well, I think of the carrot of the stick.
The carrot.
The carrot of the stick. Yeah.
I've been working on this. I've been working on this website. I haven't been getting much sleep recently. But anyway, so yeah, the happiness as the power of choice, it is so clear that it's really the best way to get things done, both for ourselves and the rest of the world.
Well, that's great. This is very interesting, happiness and power. If you want to learn more about what we're talking about, you could check out my website, happinessclub.com. We have Happiness Club meetings, and probably in your area, they're spreading around the country. And so check that out, please, www.happinessclub.com. You could find out more about what George and I are up to. And we're up to a lot. We keep thinking. And I got to tell you, doing a happiness show with George, you should be on this side, because he's a lot of fun, and I really do enjoy working with George. It is just incredible. Well, that's about all the time we have for today. Thanks for watching. In the future, we'll explore other topics designed to help us enjoy life. Be good, think well, feel very happy, and I hope you join us again next week on The Happiness Show.
Happiness is powerful. It's our underlying need. Happiness is why we live each day. Happiness is destiny. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.